Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. Bit of a rainy day in Vancouver, but that happens sometimes. Yeah, let's see. So Ryan is here. Good morning, Ryan. Abby's here. Good morning, Abby. Simrat is here. Good morning, Simrat. And Sarah's here. Good morning, Sarah. Let me see. No, maybe I'll talk about that later. Okay, let's dive in. So, yesterday, we were talking about classism, right, which is an oppressive relationship between a dominant group and a minoritized group, right? And the dominant group are generally the people in the owning class, okay? So those are the people that have money. They usually have power that goes along with that money. Sometimes they have friends who are connected to, levels of government. They're connected to larger companies. And so as a result, they can create society as they want, right? People with money and power can design a society that works well for them and, maybe not so well for the rest of us. I don't know, does anyone follow Bernie Sanders on Twitter? Probably not. Probably not. But if you do you know who Bernie Sanders is?
Socialist?
Yeah, he has some socialist leanings, but yeah, he's a member of the Democratic Party. He's attempted to gain a nomination to run for president. This time he lost out to Joe Biden, but he's been tweeting things over the past, well, he's been tweeting things for a long time, but I saw a couple come up last week where he said that companies like Amazon and Nike and Federal Express, FedEx, his statement was that those companies don't pay any corporate tax, despite the fact that they make billions and billions of dollars in revenue and profit. They aren't really paying any taxes because the tax laws are such that they are allowed to write off business expenses and various things. And so, that's kind of, if his claim is true, and I'll admit I haven't done the digging and I don't understand the US tax code. If that claim is true, and I suspect that it is, that's pretty significant, right? Because I just filed my taxes yesterday. And do you think I paid $0 in tax? I did not. In fact, I paid a lot of tax, a lot more than I would like to see go out of my bank account, but that's kind of how it is for regular people. Regular people have to pay their taxes, but shockingly, large companies that make billions and billions of dollars in profit somehow don't, right? And again, why is that? Well, because rich and powerful people get to lobby the government for things that they want, and what they want are tax laws that favor them, right? That was a bit of a tangent, but anyway, yeah, the owning class is the dominant group here, and all the rest of us are in the minoritized group, right? So middle class people, working class people, and poor people living below the poverty line. Although I said all of us, but is anyone in the owning class? Is anyone here super rich? Nicholas? Tons of money? Like crazy rich Asians rich? No, not even close. Not even close. My partner, my girlfriend, she was like, early in our relationship, she asked me, she said, is there any chance that you're like rich, like crazy rich Asians rich, and I'll just like, we'll fall in love, and then I'll reveal to her later that, oh, by the way, I have billions of dollars. I was like, I'm very sorry to tell you that that's not the case. But she didn't break up with me after that, so that's a good sign. Okay, so anyway, you can divide society up in a number of different ways, right? So this might be one way to describe kind of economic inequalities within society. There's other ways too. You can divide things up into 4 or to 3 or to 6 or whatever, right? So these aren't these aren't hard and fast divisions. They're just kind of categories that help us describe what kind of people we have in society, right? We watched a little video yesterday, and the video talked about wealth. So how much wealth do people have? And so when you calculate this, usually what you do you know how people calculate their wealth or their net worth? Any idea? So basically what you do is you add up all of your assets and then you subtract your liabilities. Okay, so anything that you own that has value, any money that you have in the bank, any investments, you add all of that up and then you subtract the things that you owe, right? So if you have a car payment, you have to subtract that. If you have a mortgage payment, you have to subtract that. If you have a large debt that you're trying to pay off, you have to subtract that. So once you do that, you come up with a number, and that's your net worth. Lots of people have a very low net worth because they have very little in the way of savings, but they have a lot of debt, right? And so actually, you know, to be anywhere where you have a positive net worth is pretty good, because a lot of people have car payments, they have mortgage payments, and that puts them, you know, in a negative net worth. But anyway, I'm getting onto lots of tangents today. What's going on? Is my mind just going like everywhere? Anyway, so the study that the video talks about asked people to estimate what is the wealth distribution in the United States. How, you know, they divided society up into equal parts of 20%, and they said how much wealth does each fifth of society have? And again, what they found out was that people were vastly underestimating how unequal American society actually was, right? And so again, the middle bar graph is what people in the US think is the case. The bottom is what they would like to see, I think. But as you can see, the actual wealth distribution in the United States is pretty unequal, right? And again, you don't have to look very far. You know, you can almost see that in two numbers. How much is Jeff Bezos worth now? Has anyone seen that dollar figure? The owner of Amazon? I'm gonna look it up. Okay, where is he now? Jeff Bezos. Oh my God. Okay, do you want to take a guess at how much he's worth? How much? 300 billion. Wow. 500? Oh my God. Okay, I thought you guys were going to come under. He's actually worth $188.6 billion. Is he richer now? Okay, so let's just take those. So between those two guys, they have probably almost $500 billion. I think that's half of a trillion, but I don't know, because whoever counts that high, like I don't even know the right number to use. That number is so big, yeah. But if you look at the United States, in a country of 300 million people, I think the statistic is about 13% of them live below the poverty line. So 13% of Americans, which is, I don't know, what is that? 10% of 3, so 3 million? Nope, more than that, 30 million. So 30 million Americans are, more than 30 million Americans are having trouble just paying the bills, right? Just paying for their rent and their food, you know, for clothing to wear. They're having trouble just paying for that, right? Even though they're shopping at Walmart and No Frills and, you know, trying to keep costs low. 30 million Americans cannot pay for those things, and yet those two guys are worth, I think, $500 billion. You know, what is, anyway, I don't want to I don't want to inject too much of my personal bias in here, but I fear I already have. So clearly things are very unequal. We watched another video that talked about some causes of economic inequality. And we said some of these things are societal and global. Okay, so we said technology advances every day, and some of that technology is replacing workers, right? So factory work has become automated. There's lots of robots that go into building things, and again, robots are expensive at the beginning to buy, but over time they get cheaper because robots don't take breaks, right? And they do things perfectly every time. They never make a mistake. They never need a sick day. They never want a raise. They just keep working away, right? And so robots and algorithms and artificial intelligence, all of those things are taking over occupations that used to be done by humans, right? And again, you don't have to look very far. The grocery store, the bank, those sort of self-scan machines and ATM machines, those things used to be done by people, right? And now we don't need to hire people. So again, where do those people go, right? And as society continues to be more technologically advanced, and we get more and more machines and computers to do the work of other people, how do those people earn a living? Right? What's going to happen to them when, once we have self-driving cars, right? How far do you think we are away from self-driving cars? Close? Another, 5 years? Okay, let's say 5 years. Let's even say 10 years. Let's say it takes 10 years to perfect this technology. I doubt it, but let's say 10 years. Once we have self-driving cars, who's out of work?
Taxi drivers.
Taxi driver. Why would you pay a taxi driver when you can just get in a self-driving taxi, right? You just tell it where it wants to go. You can already do that with Siri and Google Maps, right? So you just tell the car where you want it to go, and it goes there. You don't even have to make small talk with the taxi driver, right? So all of those taxi drivers out of work. Who else is out of work? Bus drivers, right? There's lots of bus drivers in Vancouver driving buses around. Don't need them anymore, right? Where are all those people going to go? Thousands of people just in Vancouver alone, never mind in North America or globally, right? What jobs are those people now going to get? Right? And this is one technological innovation, but there's lots of technological innovations that are replacing people, right? Computers can do them faster, more efficiently. They don't take any breaks. They don't make any mistakes usually. And so, it becomes cheaper and easier for all of us, right? The convenience factor is there. But again, where do those people go? How do they earn a living when they're not driving a bus anymore, right? Globalization is also important, right? So again, as the world has become more globalized in terms of manufacturing and production, oh, that was me, I'm sorry. As the world's become more connected in terms of production, some jobs are moving into different countries, right? And so the US and Canada have lost a lot of their manufacturing sector to countries like China. For China, it's been great, right? But for us, those people that used to work in manufacturing have slid down the economic ladder, right? Some of them have moved up, they've got college educations and so forth, but a lot of them have slipped down, right? And so there's far fewer middle-skill jobs. There's far fewer middle-skill jobs than there used to be, right? We said some companies are getting massive, right? Amazon, Apple, those companies are huge. Microsoft, they're huge and they're difficult to compete with, right? And so that means that some companies are making huge profits, and the people that work there, the highest people, are being paid more and more, right? You can't pay, if Apple makes, billions and billions and billions of dollars a year, you can't pay the CEO of Apple like $200,000 a year. There's no way. You've got to pay him or her appropriate with the company's profits. And the profits are huge, right? 100 years ago, there were no companies that big. There were no companies that made that much money. But now there is, right? Some of these companies have more economic power than some countries, right? Failing labor, we said that labor unions are on the decline. People aren't forming them, or employers are successfully making sure that they do not form. And we said that Amazon currently is working very hard to ensure that, I think, their Alabama workers do not unionize. And we said, you know, that's good for the company, because the company then doesn't have to negotiate so hard with its employees, but it's not good for regular people, right? They tend to make less when unions aren't around to protect them. Although I do have some other criticisms of unions, but we don't need to go there. And finally, this seizing the advantage thing. So this is kind of where the social justice aspect comes in, is that, again, people in the dominant group can influence society, right? They tend to have institutional power, right? They have social power, they have economic power, and they are able to kind of create society in a way that benefits them. And again, if you believe Bernie Sanders' claim that a company like Nike paid no federal tax last year, what is that if not creating society in the way you want it to run, right? If I could arrange it so I paid no federal tax, that would be great too, right? But I can't, right? Because I don't have that kind of power. But Nike does, right? Amazon does. They can push the government for tax breaks, and they do, and they get them, right? And again, to the point where, again, if Bernie Sanders is to be believed, they're not paying anything at all. I'm paying more federal tax than Nike is. Does that sound right to you? No, it doesn't sound right at all, right? But it, you know, again, if Bernie Sanders is correct, it is reality. Okay, so where we left off yesterday was talking about the concept of social mobility. We talked about that a few days ago. The idea is, if you live in a society with good or with high social mobility, can you move up the economic ladder, right? Can you be born into poverty, you know, into a poor household, maybe a single mother, you know, working at McDonald's or something? Can you be born into that household and still work your way up? Do you still have a shot at maybe going to university and being a lawyer or something like that? Do you have that opportunity, or are you stuck, right? And so, again, countries with high social mobility, you're not stuck, right? There is a good possibility that you can work your way out of that poverty, that you can go to a good school, get a good education, you know, obtain a decent paying job and climb out of poverty. Some countries have low social mobility, in which case the odds are not that great, right? And again, you know, if you go back to, you know, caste system India, you'll find that's a society with basically no social mobility, right? You're born into a certain level of society, a certain caste, that's where you stay. You marry someone from that caste, you do the work, the occupations that belong to that caste, and that's where you are. There's no movement, right? But other societies, you can actually move, right? I'll actually mention very quickly too, we've talked about this before, but the idea that society is stratified, right? That there are levels to society. And here we're talking about levels of society that have to do mostly with money, but also power, right? And so again, we talked about the idea that some people have political power, financial power, social power, and those things organize people into sort of different levels of society. And here in this diagram, you can see that they've organized society a little bit differently, right? They've divided into 6 categories. Earlier we said there were 4. Again, people divide things up differently. Okay. Right. Good morning. So, social mobility is if you live in a society with good social mobility, you can climb the ladder, right? If you are in poverty, there is a chance that you can kind of rise up and obtain a better life. But what we often find is people who are in poverty are often stuck there, right? They find it difficult to improve their situation. They find it difficult to kind of move into a more secure level of economic situation. That's not grammatically correct, but I don't know where I was going. So why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so hard to get out of poverty once you're in it? Or am I wrong? Is it easy to get out of poverty? What do you think?
Depends on parents.
Say again?
Depends on your parents.
Okay, give me a little more. It depends on your
Like,
parents.
If your parents are rich, you can go to a good university.
Yeah, but if your parents are not rich, you can't, right? Okay, so yeah, because if you want to equate, success with having a university degrees cost money, right? And if you don't have any, how are you going to get that university degree? University degrees? I don't know for sure. I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I suspect that overall that university education is cheaper in Canada. There are certain, there are certain American private schools that just charge a significant tuition rate to the point where it's significantly higher than Canada. Canada doesn't really have, as I understand it, there's a lot of hierarchy, I think, to U.S. Universities. Some are kind of, Yale, Harvard, right? Those are at the top, and then you can kind of move down. And Canada, there's fewer universities, but I think they're also less separated out, right? They're more equal. So, you could go to University of Toronto, and University of Toronto is a great university. It's got a lot of history, and it's got a lot of kind of prestige and status associated with it. But if you went to University of Alberta, you're not going to get a worse education there. It's not quite as prestigious, right? Nobody says, "Oh, I'm from University of Alberta," which I am. But you will get a good education. Your degree will be respected if you go to UBC or SFU. I feel like in Canada we're not so particular about what university you go to, because I think there's just less of a hierarchy. I think in the U.S. there's much more. There's a greater span, and so yeah, when you get up to those, elite level schools, yeah, you need cash, or you need some kind of free ride scholarship to attend those schools. Canada doesn't so much have that. I think U of T, I think University of Toronto might be a little more expensive than some of the others, but not appreciably. Of course, if you're an international student, they're going to charge you a ridiculous amount, which I strongly disagree with, but that's how that is. Okay, so money's a factor, right? If you want to be successful, you need a degree or some sort of training. Training's expensive, right? Why else do you think people get stuck in poverty?
I think debt.
Debt? Okay. Explain that for me.
I don't know, families carry on debt and it passes down.
Okay, so you can, I guess you can inherit debt. You mean?
Let's say I'm married to my husband and he has, and then
Oh.
So it all comes on me, and then what if I don't pay it off? Then it goes to my children. And then
Right. So, yeah, people kind of mismanaging their money, can have effects on others in the family, right? If somebody has a massive amount of debt, yeah, you might be able to pick it up. Um, in some countries, you can declare bankruptcy. That always helps. But that's not good either, right? Because then you have no credit. People won't, give you credit cards. They won't give you any loans. You might have trouble signing a lease on an apartment because you have no credit, and so that's a problem in itself, right? And actually, that's probably worth saying too, right? Is that if you have really bad credit because you haven't done a good job, or just because you needed to use credit to pay the bills while you were hurt and you couldn't go to work or whatever it is, if you have to declare bankruptcy, that might be an issue for you, right? Because again, you can't get credit cards, you might find it hard to get a bank account, you might not be able to sign a lease to rent an apartment. And again, if you can't get those basic things, then things are going to be a struggle, right? If you can't rent a place or you can't get a credit card, struggle too, right? What else? What else do people stay in poverty? Country?
Yeah.
What about a country?
Like some countries, education is free, like Italy and Norway.
Okay, sorry, say that one more time.
In some countries, education is free.
Right. In some countries, education is free, right? And so you probably won't be surprised to hear this, but those are often the countries that have better social mobility. Not shockingly, right? Abby here says, yeah, they don't have the same opportunities as other people in poverty, or they don't have the same accessibility. And I think that's very true as well, right? So one of the things that I saw was when I was living in Edmonton, I lived kind of close to downtown, and I would pop in sometimes to Shoppers Drug Mart. There was a Shoppers Drug Mart right by my building, and I would just go in to buy, shampoo or whatever. What?
Shampoo.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's all on sale now, right? So I would pop in there to buy chocolate, and what I would see though is that some people, mostly kind of older people, were in there and basically were doing their grocery shopping in Shoppers Drug Mart. And this is a horrible idea because A, they don't really have any fresh, nutritious food, right, for these poor people. But two, Shoppers Drug Mart is expensive, right, unless the chocolate is on sale. But if it's not, it's an expensive place. But when you looked at these people, you kind of think, well, okay, they're living here downtown, but they probably, their mobility is limited because they're kind of shuffling around a bit, so they can't walk very far. They probably don't have a lot of money, so they can't just hop in their car and go to Costco or Superstore. And so they wind up shopping here, but they're actually paying more for their groceries, but they don't have enough money to afford a cab or a car or a Costco membership, which also costs money. And so in a weird way, they didn't actually have enough money to save money. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, like if you have money, if you have credit, yeah, you can get yourself a car, you can get yourself a Costco membership, you can go and stock up on all that bulk stuff, which is cheaper. You can put it in your freezer at home if you have a freezer, and you can actually save money that way. But you actually need money in order to save it. If you don't have that money, yeah, you lose it, right? Anyone here have a checking account? Checking account at the bank? Did they charge you any money for it every month? No fee? Yeah?
So cheap.
It's so cheap?
Student ones, or the student ones are
Oh, the student ones, okay, yeah. If you get the non-student ones, when you're a non-student, the one I used to have, I closed it because of this reason, but they would charge me $15 a month for that checking account, unless you kept $1,000 in that account. So if you don't have $1,000, it costs you almost $20 a month to keep that account. So again, the bank is charging you money for not having any, and probably contributing to you not having it in the first place, right? And so there's lots of little examples like this where, you kind of need to have money in order to save any money. And what you'll find is that the higher up on the economic ladder you go, the easier it is to save money, right? So if you look at maybe the people living in North Van or West Van in big fancy houses, or maybe even just a regular van here in big fancy houses, somebody might live in a $3 million house or $4 million house, shockingly. But if you look at the amount that those people spend on rent or mortgage payments, usually it's a smaller percentage than the average person does. So the average person like me, even though I don't live in a $3 or $4 million house, I spend more of my income percentage on my accommodations, on the roof over my head, than those people do, right? So in a way, even though they have a $3 or $4 million house, they're actually better off. They're actually saving more money than me because they're using a smaller percentage of their income for that house. And again, you'll find that too. As you go up the economic ladder, things become cheaper, percentage-wise, right? If I go to the store and buy a thing of bananas, those bananas are the same price, whether I make minimum wage or whether I'm, Elon Musk. Although Elon Musk probably has his, imported from Ecuador, and they're carried in on a burro with a gold saddle or something. I don't know what his craziness is, but bananas are bananas, right? And they cost the same for everyone. But if you're making minimum wage, those bananas cost a lot more percentage-wise, right? So again, the higher up the economic ladder you go, in a way, the cheaper things become, right? Your basic food, your electricity and your water bill. Electricity costs everyone the same, right? We all pay the same amount. And so, again, there's kind of an unfairness built in, because the more money you have, the less your basic needs actually cost you. Well, they're the same, like, per unit of electricity. If you have a gigantic house and you leave all your lights on, then yeah, like you're gonna pay more. But the power itself is the same. Same thing with the water, right? If you pay for water, then water is the same for every household. It just matters how much you actually use. Turn off your fountain once in a while, rich people. Anyway, any other ideas why people remain stuck in poverty? Why is it difficult to get out? Because of rich people? How do you mean?
Which you said earlier, Amazon ranking, they don't pay taxes or poor people don't pay taxes.
It's true, right? So poor people don't have, well, and you could probably include all of us in this category, but we don't really have the ability to lobby the government to that degree, right? We're not that successful in paying lower taxes, right? The rich people, big companies, they are able to do those kinds of things, and they do, right? Again, it is unbelievable, the statement that I could have paid more tax last year than Nike did, right? That seems like an impossible statement, and yet, again, if Bernie Sanders is to be believed, that is exactly the case. I paid significantly more than Nike and FedEx and Amazon all combined. That does not seem right, does it? I don't know. Okay, so why are people stuck? Well, definitely for all the reasons that we just identified, right? There is difficulty getting training and education in order to get good paying jobs, and if you don't have money for that, you can't do it. Debt and sort of the inheritance of debt can play into it as well. The fact that the more money you have, the easier it is to save money. especially if you can invest, by the way. If you can invest money, then your money is making money and you don't even have to do anything about it, right? Which, again, poor people don't have the money to invest, therefore their wealth is not growing, right? The only way they make money is by selling their time. And we said again, there's only so many hours in the day, right? You cannot, if you want to double your income, you cannot double your time, right? Human beings have a limit to how much they can work. But there's some other reasons too, and so I wanted to show you an interesting TED Talk by a guy named Rutger Bregman. And he has some ideas about what poverty is, why people get stuck, and a potential solution as well. Okay, so he's going to talk about those three things. And so I have some questions for you here, things I want you to pay attention to as we listen. He says, or he's titled his talk, "Poverty isn't a lack of character, it's a lack of cash." Okay, so I want you to pay attention to these three things. So number one, what's the cause of poverty according to Rutger Bregman? And sorry, I'm just getting this set up in Microsoft Teams here. Question two, how does lack of money affect people's ability to make decisions? And so here's kind of a different thing that Rutger is going to add in. We suggested why people get stuck in poverty, but he's got an additional idea for us. What's his solution to this? And again, what do you think of the solution? Do you think it's a good solution? Do you think it will work? Okay. So for online people, everything on this slide is in Microsoft Teams. So what I'd like to direct you to do is go and watch the video, pay attention to these four things so that we can talk about them when we get back, okay? So online people, go watch the video. We'll see you at the end of it. I think it's about 10 minutes long, so we'll see you back here after you watch it. Okay. Right, so not something that we had sort of brainstormed earlier, but a different take on what poverty is, right? Um, just quickly review for me here, or do you want to take a break? Okay, let's take a break. I can see it in your face. 10-minute break, come back, we'll talk about these, okay? All right, and we are back. So, obviously, if you think about this TED Talk as an argument, and you should, because Rutger is making an argument here, obviously the conclusion to his argument is this, is that poverty isn't a lack of character, right? There's not something wrong with the poor. They're not poor because they're lazy or stupid or not working hard enough. What they are is they're poor because they don't have money, right? Which again on the surface is a little overly simplistic, right? But what does he say about the lack of money affecting people's decision-making ability? What does he say about that? Mm-hmm.
Has too many things to do at once, so it's slow and doesn't do the best job.
Yeah, he uses it's a certain type of mentality. What does he call it? Yeah, scarcity mentality, right? So he suggests, and I believe he's correct on a neuroscientific level, that your brain actually works differently when you don't have enough resources, right? When you don't have enough food, when you don't have enough money, when you don't have enough time, all of those things impact your ability to think clearly, right? And so, this is a bit of an aside, I guess, but, sometimes it's important to remember us humans are, we're living in 2021. It's a very futuristic world, right? We're not running around the savannas in Africa like we were a couple 100,000 years ago. We live in a very modern society, but it's important to remember that your body doesn't know that, right? Like your body and your mind are evolved from millions of years ago, and they still think they're back on the savannah. Your body still thinks that it is, in the past, and it doesn't know what century it's in. And so, again, our brains kind of work differently when we are desperate. When we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough food, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, our brains start to narrowly focus on getting the thing that we need, right? And again, if you think back a couple million years ago when we were, upright bipedal apes running around Africa, that would have been important, right? If you were hungry and you were going to starve, it probably made sense that you focused on just getting food in order to survive, right? That makes sense. And so some of those things in the modern world, they worked for us very well in the Stone Age, but sometimes they get in our way, in the life we live now. And Rutger's saying, that when people don't have enough money, the decisions they make are not as good, right? They're in scarcity mentality. They are desperate, right? And they start making bad choices. So what's his solution to this? Universal basic income or guaranteed basic income. There's a few different names that this thing is known by. Have you ever heard of this concept before? Universal basic income or guaranteed basic income? No? It's an idea that keeps cropping up. And so if you want to imagine it this way, when we went into lockdown here in Canada about a year ago, in a way we had a version of universal basic income. The government was sending out checks to everyone, right? That CERB, that certified, what did it stand for? Certified COVID Emergency Resource Benefit? Is that what it was called? So the government started sending out checks to everyone, right? Because people weren't working, they were at home, they needed to pay their rent and buy food, and so the government just started handing out money to people in order to allow them to pay their bills. And so for a brief moment, technically we had guaranteed basic income. You saw that they tried it as an experiment in Dauphin, Manitoba, right, in 1974. They actually they took a town and they gave it a guaranteed basic income. And what happened as a result? Things got better. How did we know things got better? The government sending me free money sounds good, but I mean, how do we know? How do we know things get better? Right? Educational outcomes are better. Kids do better in school. Yeah, fewer hospitalizations. That's good. What else? He didn't have charts for them, but he mentioned them. Yeah, people were healthier. Fewer instances of domestic violence, right? That was important too. So when we look at these sort of broad indicators of, how society is doing, things actually improved. And what's the big fear? What's people's big fear if you create a system of universal basic income and you make sure that everybody makes a certain amount of money every year? What's the fear? Communism, yeah. It's a slide into communism. That's possible, yeah. What else? What's the other fear? Why might people say no? Guaranteed basic income? Horrible idea. Right? So there's the idea that people might waste or squander that money, right? Because as Rutger says, it's free money. It doesn't come with any strings attached or places that you have to spend it. What's the other fear? Okay, so that's the other thing, right? The U.S. seems to be spending a lot on military, but they don't want to spend anything on an idea like this. It was when he was talking about that idea that you have to earn a living. So if you can make a living without working, what's the big fear? Yeah, nobody works, right? Everybody stays home and just collects their government checks, right? Did that happen in Dauphin? No. Do you think it would happen in real life? Like here in Canada, if we said, you know what, the poverty line in Canada is, let's say it's $17,000 a year. So if you make less than $17,000 a year, you are living below the poverty line. You cannot afford food, shelter, clothing, okay? So if we promise that every Canadian will at least make $17,000 a year, do you think people will start quitting their jobs? Maybe? Do you think I'll quit mine? Really?
Don't know.
There's always that chance that you could do it, but then it just, for yourself, doesn't make sense.
Why not? Why doesn't it make
Because
sense?
fine, you're getting money to handle your other needs, work, and this other money that you're getting, save it or use it for your own stuff, but it makes sense for yourself.
It does make sense, but keep in mind it works on a negative income tax system. So if I make, let's say I make $50,000 a year right now, okay? So if I make 50 and the government's guaranteeing me 17, that doesn't mean I'm going to make 67. They're not going to send me 17. They're just going to make sure that I make at least 17. And if I make 17, which I do, they're not going to send me any money. But if I go below 17, they're going to top me back up to 17. Okay, so it's not a plus. It's not a plus on my salary. It's a safety cushion. It's a safety net. I cannot go below 17, or the government will top me up. So yeah, do you think people will quit their jobs? Do you think I will? No, right? And I won't, because, and no offense to anyone, but I don't want to live at the poverty line, right? I don't now, thank God, and I don't really ever want to. So am I going to quit my job for this?
No.
Definitely not, right? I'm going to keep right on working. It's not going to change anything for me. But all those people living in poverty, is it going to change something for them? Yeah, right? Suddenly they've got a bit of a buffer, right? And so, yes, maybe they're struggling to make ends meet. Maybe they're struggling to pay their rent. And then if they get sick, or if they break their leg and can't go to work, the government can keep them at at least at the poverty line while they recover or while they figure their situation out, right? And keep in mind that a pretty significant number of people who live in poverty are actually children. Children don't have jobs, yet children cost money, right? You've got to feed them and clothe them. And so a large percentage of the population that lives in poverty are children. And so this money will go to feeding and clothing those kids, right? Not to people, spending money on frivolous things. But why might people reject an idea like this? Well, yeah, and maybe if I can, maybe if I can reshape what you said, there is a prejudice against poor people, right? And Margaret Thatcher, former president of the United Kingdom, she pretty clearly expressed that prejudice, right? What did she say? Poverty is a character defect? Is that what she said? Yeah. So if you're in poverty, there's something wrong with you, right? You are, there's something wrong with you if you're in poverty. And if if there wasn't anything wrong with you, you wouldn't be there. And sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. Where did I start before? Oh, right, the prejudice thing. Sorry. Yeah, there is prejudice against poor people. And so Margaret Thatcher pretty clearly expressed it in no uncertain terms. But a lot of people do have that, do carry that prejudice, right? That if people are homeless or if people are living in poverty or can't pay their bills, there must be something wrong with them, right? There must be something wrong. And again, there's a grain of truth to that, right? Because sometimes there is something wrong, right? Sometimes people are struggling with mental health issues or developmental issues or drug or alcohol addiction. And so, yeah, these things are going to keep you in poverty. They're going to make it difficult for you to rise out of it. And so, again, like a lot of stereotypes that, they are true from a certain angle or they have a grain of truth to them, but it doesn't really describe the entire situation. And even if that is true, if we believe that, oh, well, there's something wrong with you, that's why you're in poverty, if someone has a developmental disability, are they likely to be able to fix that on their own? Yeah, no, right? If someone has schizophrenia, what are we going to say to them? So are we going to say, you'll just have to work harder at not having schizophrenia and then you'll rise out of poverty? Is that a reasonable thing to say to someone? No, right? People don't treat their schizophrenia by trying harder, right? That's not how it works. And so, again, Rutger's saying that, we can change how people live and how they behave simply by changing the context of their decision, right? By giving them at least enough money so that they can live at the poverty line, right? And that will allow them to at least have a bit of a cushion and they can build from there, right? But if you can't afford even the basic things, you're going to struggle, right? And part of the reason he says is you're going to be in this scarcity mindset, right? But my question to you is, what do you think of that? Do you think this is a good option? Is this something that we should do? Or should we not do it? What about criminals?
Yeah, because I've heard like some people saying that poverty, people living in poverty usually don't I'm not really sure.
Oh, but so you're saying so people who live in poverty often resort to criminal activity?
I don't believe so. I don't really know.
No, I think that's reasonable, right? If you cannot earn money, if you cannot find a way to earn money in a legitimate way, yeah, some people will turn to crime, right? Especially young people who, don't see don't see any opportunities for them, don't see a way out of poverty or out of their neighborhood, yeah, they will turn to, to drug dealing because the money is there, right? It's a path to, the financial security or success that they want, right? And so that's true, but do you think it would make it better if people were given the money to at least be able to live above the poverty line? Do you think it would decrease people's desire to be involved in, not desire, but would it keep people from having to commit criminal acts to support themselves? Maybe.
Now they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Maybe, yeah, right? At least, again, they might slide down the economic ladder, but they'll be caught, right? It's not a total plunge into homelessness and living under a bridge, right? You've got a net to catch you, and you can hopefully start to climb your way back up, right? And again, for most of the people in Canada, they'll never see this money, right? Most of the people who work a regular job in Canada, whatever that job might be, they'll never see it, right? And they'll never need it, hopefully, fingers crossed. But the people who do need it will be given that assistance, right? And again, will some people misuse that money? Probably. Will some people spend it on drugs? Probably. But will some people be helped? Yeah, right? And so again, maybe this isn't such a crazy idea, and it's especially maybe not crazy in the context of the United States that spends an immense amount of money over that simply on their military budget, right? A slight reduction in their military budget can solve this issue, right? Just like that. And it's not, how hard is it to send out checks, right? How hard is it to modify people's income tax filings? Easy peasy, right? Again, especially because most people in the US or in Canada don't need this money, but some people do, right? But I don't know. It's an idea that keeps coming up. Every once in a while, someone will suggest it again. What do you think? Do you think that we'll move toward this in Canada eventually, or no?
And why haven't they?
What's that?
Why haven't they?
Why haven't they? Well, the price tag is always scary, right? $175 billion on an unproven program is a lot of money. I think it's probably fair to say that prejudice plays a role. People's not prejudicial, but ideologies, right? The ideology that you have to work for a living in society. The idea that this is a meritocracy, and if you want more money, you have to work harder. And why does this guy over here? There's nobody over there, by the way. Why does this guy over here get $17,000 a year and I don't get anything? I got to go to work every day. Not that I mind it, but I got to go to work every day, and this guy just gets free money from the government. People don't like that, right? They feel that everybody should have to work, should have to earn what they get, right? They shouldn't just take free handouts from the government. And lots of people in Canada think that way. Probably more people in the United States think that way because the United States is more meritocratic and individualistic than we are in Canada. What was I going to say? Yeah, so I think that has held people back from doing it. And who would this program help the most? Well, the poor, right? Yeah, it would help the poor. Do you think the poor are a majority or a minority in Canada? Minority, right? I think there's maybe, gosh, I wish I had my slide that said it. Let's say 8% of Canadians live in poverty. That's probably a little high, but let's say 8%. Is that a lot of votes, do you think? No, right? So the politicians are going to do what the voters tell them to, and most of the voters aren't poor, right? So the politicians are going to do what the working class and the middle class and the owning class want them to do. The poor might want them to do something, but they don't really have the votes to convince politicians to do it. And so, again, they're a minoritized group, but they also don't have any institutional power, and they don't have the numbers to to create enough pressure, right? So the poor kind of have to wait until everyone else wants this program rather than themselves, right?
So then if, like, when you see somebody begging for money or you give them, you know what I mean? Like, you do it out of your own pocket.
Right.
So you should be okay with the government giving them money because you're helping them. You're just helping them on a larger scale.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. The other thing that might be interesting to think about with this universal basic income, with I don't know where you are, whether you agree or disagree, but remember what I brought up earlier with that technological change idea, right? As we continue on with our technological advancement, more and more things are going to be done by robots, by algorithms, by machines, by computers, right? And so again, once we figure out cars that can drive themselves, all of those taxi drivers and bus drivers and ferry drivers and all those people working in transportation suddenly won't have jobs. Where are they going to go? And again, that's just one small industry. What if we get to a point in Canada where, let's say 20%, let's say there are no jobs for 20% of Canadians. Okay, we can't create jobs out of nothing, and we don't need them because all the jobs that those people used to do are all handled by computers now. Right? What do we do with those people? Do we say, sorry, I guess there's no job for you, so go live in the street? Do we want 20% of Canada's population living in the street? No, right? That's not good for them, and nobody's going to enjoy, a huge number of homeless people just kind of rambling around with nothing to do, right? Crime is going to go up. It's going to be a disaster, right? But what if we get to that point where we just don't need, there's just no jobs for 20% of people. We can't make them out of nothing. Can't pay people to do nothing, or can you? So will we arrive at a point where in Canada we just need to do this, right? We need to simply support 20% of the population because their jobs are done by computers and robots and other things. Or stop reproducing. Well, interestingly, if you look at Canada's birth rate, we kind of have. Most people, I forget what the statistic is now, but most couples have 1.6 or 1.4 children. So they actually don't replace themselves. So if you just look at Canada's birth rate, our population is actually slowly declining. That's why we bring in so many immigrants a year, because more people equals more economic growth equals more money, right? So we're actually not, Canada's not growing because of its birth rate, it's growing because of immigration. Of course, we could simply close the door and say, okay, Canada's full, try back in 10 years, but then our population starts to...
Just put up the whole self-driving cars.
What's that?
Remove the self-driving cars.
Remove. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is that who's in control of this system? Who's in control of whether we have self-driving cars? Elon Musk, maybe, right? He can certainly develop them. I think Apple's working on one too, right? So companies can certainly develop them, but what would they need in order to come into use? Well, yeah, they would need to influence politicians. Why is that? Because what?
You
Yeah, they need approval, right? You can't just have self-driving cars running around, you know, uncertified, right? That's super dangerous. So the government has to certify or approve them. Do you think the government will? If they work? Yeah, right? So self-driving cars will probably generate a huge amount of income, right? Licensing, sales tax for buying them. The government will be more than happy to, to accept that new revenue and to, do what big business wants it to do, right? But again, what happens to those people on the other end, right? What happens to those people who lose their jobs? What are we going to do with them? And who's going to pay for them, right? Who's going to pay to have them retrained or simply pay to support them if we get to a point where there just aren't jobs for those people? Who's going to foot the bill for that? Or are we just going to just turn them into the street and say, sorry people, no jobs, good luck.
The trains are self-driving, like the best of driving.
Like train, you mean this one on this side?
No drivers.
Oh.
Yeah. There's no some places in Canada their trains are still driven. Yeah, like in Edmonton where I come from, their metro system still has drivers, but the system is a lot smaller. It's much smaller. Yeah, but this one has no drivers, right? And so I don't think it's a stretch to imagine buses that can drive themselves as well. Probably in not very long. And so again, what's going to happen to those people?
But do you think that the government will willingly unemploy people? Like they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yeah.
I think that they do.
I don't know. I mean, I think there has to be a plan on the other side, right? So I think I can definitely see the government approving that technology if it's safe. I can definitely see them approving it, but again, what's the solution for those people on the other side, and who pays is the question, right? Because I think what we've seen is that we haven't been very good at developing technology and then saying no to it, right? Once the technology exists, we really want to use it. And so again, those self-driving cars and buses are going to be perfected, right? And once they actually don't even have to be perfect, but that's another question. They are going to be perfected. We are going to be using them. And so, what other decisions are we going to have to make? And I think Rutger's talk kind of hinges into that, right? In terms of what are we going to do with these people who are put out of work, right?
It's not just the bus drivers, traffic police. What you could move on?
That's true, right? You don't need, well, there's not a lot of traffic police anyway, but even so, you don't need those people. One of the things that is also being developed is long haul trucking. So those big long trucks that you see on the highway, those are all driven by humans, but they're working on technology that will allow those things to be driven by a computer. All those guys are going to be out of work now, right? Because those guys drive a long way. They need to sleep sometimes, right? And so long haul trucking could be much more efficient if a computer was driving the truck and the computer never had to sleep or take a break or pull over and rest its eyes because it couldn't see anymore or whatever those guys do. That's in the works, right? So there's a potential for a lot of people to be put out of work by new technology. And again, where are those people going to find work after that? And do we get to a point where there's just a percentage of society that we just don't have jobs, right? Those things are taken care of by computers. And what do we do with them? What do we do with those people? But, what's that? Enlist them? Yeah, well, then we have a big military, but somebody's got to pay for the military too. Militaries are not expensive, as the United States proves year after year. Anyway, we're kind of out of time, so I'll end it there. Again, those are questions for your generation to answer, not mine. But good luck with that. That's it. I'll see you tomorrow. I think we'll start tying up this classism thing tomorrow. But yeah, that's it. See you tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon.